A group of men with rifles and pitchforks move through a field of wheat, hoping they're not too late to save the kids. An old man wakes up. His name is Paul Edgecomb, and though he lives in a nursing home, he's still sharp and independent. After washing up, he asks for just 2 pieces of dry toast to leave. One of the orderlies figures out Paul is planning to sneak off on a hike in the mountains, even though that's not allowed, but he promises to keep quiet and just tells Paul to be careful. Paul heads out and finds his way to an abandoned cabin in the woods. Later, back at the home, everyone is watching a classic film called Top Hat on TV. As Paul watches, something hits him hard. He gets emotional and starts to cry. His old friend Elaine sits beside him and comforts him. The two of them talk about how memories can crash down on you out of nowhere. 60 years earlier, Paul had worked in a prison during the Great Depression. Jobs were scarce, and he held onto his position tightly. He was the head guard in the death row block known as the Last Mile. It was also called the Green Mile because of the color of the floor tiles. They had an electric chair there, and the guards called it Old Sparky. The year that stood out most was 1935. That was when Paul came down with a painful bladder infection. His co-workers Brutal and Dean suggested he take a day off. He should have took the day off, go and see the doctor. But Paul refused. He had to be there. A new inmate was arriving. Soon, a van pulls up to the prison entrance. Rookie guard Percy and seasoned officer Harry are escorting the prisoner. The man they're bringing in is massive. He's so tall, he makes even Brutal, who's a pretty big guy himself, look small. Percy, on the other hand, is a short-tempered, arrogant little man who annoys the whole team. Paul greets the barefoot giant and asks if he plans to cause trouble. "I'm not gonna have any trouble with you, big boy." The man looks like he could tear through the entire staff without breaking a sweat, but instead, he just looks nervous and scared. The prisoner quietly calls Paul boss and steps into the cell without a fight. Paul tells Percy to leave the block, but the rookie guard resists until the other guards shout him down. The whole awkward scene is noticed by one of the other inmates, Dell, who chuckles. Percy doesn't like being laughed at and breaks Dell's fingers with his baton. Once Percy is finally gone, Paul orders the shackles removed from the new prisoner. It's clear the man is mentally challenged. He can barely write his own name. He says it's coffee, like the drink.
"Yes, sir, boss. Like the drink."
Only not spelled the same. The giant shyly asks if they leave the lights on at night. Turns out he's afraid of the dark. Lucky for him, the hallway lights stay on all night long. He reaches out to Paul, wanting to shake his hand. The guards tense up, worried he might crush him, but Paul senses there's no danger. Before he lets go, Coffee says something strange. "I tried to take it back, but it was too late." Paul asks for the new prisoner's file. Harry tells him the crime was horrifying. 2 little sisters had been taken from their home in a small town. The father and the rest of the villagers rush after the kidnapper. They find John Coffey sitting on the ground, holding the torn bodies of the 2 little girls. He's screaming and crying, as if he suddenly realized what he had done. The father almost kills Coffey on the spot, but the others pull him back. The official report on the injuries shocks Paul. While he's reading it, the warden Hal Morris shows up. Paul asks about Hal's wife. Melinda's been suffering from terrible headaches. Work-wise, they've got a big task ahead, preparing for the upcoming execution of a prisoner named Bitterbuck. Paul also needs to be careful with Percy. The guy's a relative of the governor, which means they can't just fire him. But Percy's already eyeing a transfer to a mental hospital. It's obvious he's fascinated by psychopaths. Paul figures Percy could have transferred a long time ago. He's just hanging around to watch an execution up close. If seeing someone die is what it'll take to get rid of Percy, the guards are more than ready to put on a show and say goodbye. At home, Paul lies awake, tortured by insomnia. He can't understand how God could allow someone like Coffey to commit such a crime. His wife tries to comfort him and invites him to bed, but Paul turns her down, blaming it on his infection. The next day at the prison, something unusual happens. A mouse walks right into the middle of the hallway. Completely fearless, Brutal tosses him some food, and the little guy scurries into the padded cell used for violent inmates. It's currently just a messy storage room filled to the top with junk. The guards flip the place upside down but can't find the mouse. Then, out of nowhere, he comes back like nothing ever happened. Percy sees him and loses it, trying to stomp the mouse. But again, the little guy slips into the storage room. The other guards hear the commotion and come running. They decide to let Percy tire himself out searching just to mess with him. He spends hours hauling boxes with 0 results. Eventually, he gets yelled at for making too much noise. "We don't scare anyone, we have to, Percy." He explains that it's the guards' job to keep things calm. These men on death row are mentally fragile. Too much pressure and they might snap, hurt themselves or others. Percy doesn't listen. He insults the inmates and his fellow guards. Brutal grabs him by the throat and Paul has to step in. They all know Percy could pull some strings and get people fired, but Paul's had enough. He tells Percy straight up they're ready to lose their jobs if he crosses the line again, and next time, no one's holding back. Later, Bitterbug is taken to say goodbye to his wife and daughter. Meanwhile, the guards rehearse for the execution. An old janitor plays the prisoner. While they strap him into the electric chair, he cracks dirty jokes the whole time. The guards can't help but laugh. Black humor is all that keeps them sane. Paul, being in charge, scolds them, but even he understands. There are no smiles allowed during the official execution. Percy watches everything with a sick kind of interest. Before they put the cap with the electrodes on the prisoner's head, they place a wet sponge underneath it. That helps the current go through faster, makes the death quicker, more humane. I'm fired! I'm fired! Later that evening, they shave the top of Bitterbug's head for better conductivity. Paul sits with him for one final conversation. The man says he believes that if someone truly regrets their sins, they get to go back to relive the happiest moment of their life after death. For him, it was a camping trip with his wife, just the two of them, sitting by the fire in the mountains, her beautiful body glowing in the light. They were only 18, talking all night until the sun came up. Paul quietly says he believes that too. Maybe that's what heaven is. Still, Bitterbug is terrified of the execution. Paul does his best to calm him. That night, they strap him into the electric chair, with witnesses watching from behind the glass. One of the guards announces the procedure. Electricity will pass through your body until you are dead. May God have mercy on your soul. Brutal pulls the switch. The room fills with terrible screams. When the doctor checks his pulse, the man is still alive. A second jolt finishes the job in silence. Afterward, Percy can't help himself. So long, Chief, he mutters. Send us a postcard from hell. Let us know if it's hot. Brutal pushes him out of the way and wheels the body out. Later, Paul talks with Percy about finally transferring out of death row. But Percy's not satisfied. He doesn't just want to watch the next execution, he wants to run it. Paul, hesitating, agrees. The next day, the little mouse shows up again. This time, he crawls right into Dell's cell. The inmate is instantly in love and names him Mr. Jingles. Turns out, the mouse is pretty smart. He even follows commands and rolls over a thread spool like it's a circus trick. Even Percy seems kind of impressed. He offers the mouse an empty cigar box for a home. Later, Hal comes to Paul with news. A new prisoner is coming. His name is William Wharton, goes by Wild Bill. He's done all sorts of horrible things. His death sentence is for murdering 3 people, including a pregnant woman. Then Hal breaks down. He's not just upset about work. His wife Melinda, she's been diagnosed with a massive brain tumor. There's no hope. Hal doesn't even know how to tell her. That night, Paul can't sleep. The pain in his groin is getting worse. He plans to finally see a doctor. But first, they have to bring in Wild Bill. In the morning, Dean, Harry, and Percy go to pick him up from the psych ward. The drugs make Bill look like a zombie. But as soon as they bring him onto the mile, Paul's already sweating from the fever. And Wild Bill drops the act. He headbutts Percy and throws a chain around Dean's neck. Paul tries to help, but gets hit between the legs and collapses from the pain. Elderly Harry can't hold back the crazed inmate either. Percy just stands there frozen like a scared little statue. The chaos is only stopped when Brutus shows up and knocks Wild Bill out cold. He stares at the unconscious man and mutters how the world even produces people like this. Paul sends the injured guards to the doctor and orders the rest to write up a report. He stays behind to keep watch over the mile, though he can barely stand from the pain. John Coffey calls to him again. Paul mutters that this really isn't a good time, but still walks closer, dragging his feet. Suddenly, Coffey grabs him and pulls him against the bars. Dell calls out for help. But before anyone can act, Coffey places his massive hand right over Paul's infected groin. The light bulb in the cell flares up bright and shatters. Coffey lets go and starts coughing violently. From his mouth comes a cloud of black ash-like dust that floats upward and vanishes into the air. Coffey tells Paul that he took the pain away from him and says he's just so tired. Completely drained, he collapses onto the bed and falls asleep. Paul stumbles to the restroom in shock and realizes that the pain is completely gone. He feels like he's been reborn. That night, Paul and his wife stay in bed together, lost in each other and in memories of their youth. The next morning, Paul takes the day off and visits the lawyer who defended Coffey in court, but the man says there's no record of Coffey's past. It's like he just fell out of the sky. Paul refuses to believe that Coffey is a violent man, but the lawyer stands by the conviction. He compares Coffey to a dog the family once adopted, sweet and quiet, until one day it suddenly attacked his son without warning. The boy lost an eye. The next day, Paul brings John some cornbread baked by his wife. When Paul asks how she liked it, John smiles and says she was very pleased. John also shares the bread with Dell and Mr. Jingles. Wild Bill asks for some too, but he's ignored. The inmates start spewing racial insults at Coffey, and Paul walks over to shut him up. In response, Bill spits straight in Paul's face. That kind of behavior is nothing new for Wild Bill. He pushes everyone's buttons. To shut him down, the guards blast him with a fire hose and toss him in the isolation cell. Bill swears he'll behave, but instead, he buys a pie from the janitor and hurls it at Brutus' face. Back to the box he goes. Dell's execution is coming up, but he has no family to say goodbye to. So, the guards put on a little performance, pretending to be big-time visitors from a circus who came to see the famous performing mouse. Meanwhile, Paul supervises Percy during the execution rehearsal. Everything goes perfectly. Afterward, Percy sees Dell happily return to his cell and seems ready to bury the hatchet. But then, Percy suddenly startles Dell as a joke, causing the man to fall and hit his head. Percy laughs, claiming it was just a prank. But as he's distracted, Wild Bill reaches through the bars, grabs Percy, and starts groping him while whispering threats. He lets go just as quickly, but Percy's left shaking. Morton mocks Percy, comparing him to a little girl. I'll let her go. While Dell laughs uncontrollably, Percy is so terrified he wets himself. Burning with shame, he begs the others to keep his humiliation a secret. Paul calmly tells him what happens on a mile stays on a mile. Dell, of course, keeps teasing him anyway. The day of Dell's execution finally arrives and he grows anxious over the fate of Mr. Jingles. Paul promises to take care of the mouse himself, but Dell worries the poor thing would be scared living near the woods by Paul's house. That's when Brutus gets creative and makes up a place called Mouseville, a big circus tent with an entire mouse city inside, where mice perform for crowds and live in luxury. Dell's eyes light up like a kid on Christmas. He believes every word. To him, Mouseville sounds like paradise. Suddenly, the spool drops, and Mr. Jingles scurries into the corridor to chase it. To everyone's horror, Percy stomps down with his boot and crushes the mouse. Then, without a word, he turns and walks away. Dell screams in heartbreak, "Nah!" while Coffey quietly reaches out and urges them to hurry. Paul gently picks up the broken little body and hands it to Coffey. The giant brings the mouse close and breathes into him. A burst of light fills the room, then, as if nothing happened, Mr. Jingles runs right back to Dell alive and well. Coffey again coughs up a cloud of dark ash. The guards are speechless. Paul and Brutus confront Percy. Paul tells him the mouse is alive and adds that Percy is as bad at killing mice as he is at doing everything else. Percy is stunned and furious, convinced it's some kind of prank to make him look like a fool. Brutus grabs him again, and Paul lays it out. Percy will disappear after Dell's execution. If he doesn't, the guards will beat him and testify under oath about every vile thing he's done, including his cowardice. They shake hands, sealing the deal. That night, Dell walks calmly to his execution. He places Mr. Jingles on Paul's shoulder and asks him to look after his friend. Since the mouse can't stay with Paul during the ceremony, Coffey takes him instead, holding the tiny creature close. Dell says goodbye to the little guy, telling him he loves him. As the guards lead him to the chair, Dell is disheartened to see Percy grinning from the sidelines. And, in his final words, Dell apologizes for his sins and once more begs Paul not to forget about Mr. Jingles. Then Percy betrays him. He cruelly blurts out the truth about Mouseville, telling Dell it was just a made-up story to keep him calm. It's just a fairy tale these guys told you to keep you quiet. And when it's time to wet the sponge that would make Dell's death quick and merciful, Percy only pretends to dip it in the water. Paul realizes too late what's happening. Percy gives the signal, and the switch is pulled. Dell convulses violently in the chair, screaming in agony, while the room fills with a burning stench. At the same time, Coffey begins to convulse in his cell, spiritually absorbing the pain to share Dell's suffering. Wharton, meanwhile, is practically jumping for joy, laughing like a maniac. Paul hopes Dell dies quickly, but he's wrong. The agony goes on and on. Flames rise from Dell's body. The audience panics, scrambling for the exits. Paul grabs Percy and forces him to watch what he's done. When the screaming finally stops, Brutus commands Percy to put out the flames with a fire extinguisher. Later, Percy has the nerve to say he didn't know about the sponge. Brutus has had enough. He slaps Percy across the face. Hal shows up furious, demanding answers from Paul about the madness that just went down. But Paul quickly realizes that the most important thing right now is to get rid of Percy, and fast, so he covers for him, keeping their deal intact and the exit path open. Then Paul checks in on John, who's lying in his cell crying silently. The big man says he felt Dell's pain, and now that it's over, he's just so tired. Mr. Jingles, still shaken, has run off to hide in the padded isolation cell again, and Coffey curls up to sleep. On the weekend, Paul and his wife pay a visit to Hal and his wife, Melinda. Surprisingly, Melinda's in decent spirits, though Hal says she sometimes slips into strange spells, shouting curses that he didn't even know she knew. The next day, Paul invites his fellow guards over for lunch, and finally shares the story of how John miraculously cured him. I'd put in a gift like that in the hands of a man and kill a child. He suggests something completely insane, sneaking John Coffey out of prison for one night to help Melinda. The idea stuns everyone. If they get caught, they'll be arrested immediately, not to mention the risk. John is still technically a convicted murderer, but Paul, for the first time, says what he really believes. John is innocent. He's convinced that no murderer or rapist could be gifted with such a power. That kind of grace doesn't come from evil. Eventually, he manages to sway them. On the night of the plan, they knock Wild Bill out with a dose of sedative strong enough to drop a horse. Then, with more than a little satisfaction, they strap Percy into a straitjacket, gag him, and lock him in the padded cell. Paul tells him it's payback for Dell. At time, Percy, so you can reflect on what you did to Dale. And Percy, still dazed, doesn't suspect a thing. Dean stays behind to man the mile. Being the youngest, with a family to protect, he can't risk being part of the escape. If questioned, he'll claim that Coffey's still in the isolation room and the others are out on an errand. Meanwhile, Coffey already knows something is up and he's delighted. Just the chance to go for a walk fills him with joy. But as he steps out of his cell, Wild Bill lunges and grabs him by the arm. A flash of panic hits John, and all the light bulbs overhead explode. Bill drops again, unconscious, outside, under the open sky. John is in awe. He lifts a handful of grass to his nose, taking in the scent, urging the others to do the same. For a moment, they all just breathe. The group piles into the truck and drives toward Hal's home. Somehow, John already knows what's about to happen. He knows someone needs him. Hal meets them at the door, shotgun in hand. He thinks it's a breakout, or worse. Hal tries to explain, but Coffey calmly steps forward, sensing exactly where he needs to go. Hal hesitates, shocked by the sight, but eventually lets them in. Coffey sits on Melinda's bed. She notices the scars covering his body. It's clear he's been beaten again and again, and he doesn't even remember his childhood. He gently introduces himself, leaning in toward her face. When their lips meet, the lights in the room grow brighter. Every clock stops. The house shakes as if hit by an earthquake. John takes in her sickness, absorbing the tumor into his own body, and begins to choke, but this time, he doesn't release the poison. He holds it in. He refuses help, and then Melinda opens her eyes. She has no memory of what just happened. All she knows is that she feels fine. She looks around the room, sees John, and reintroduces herself.
What's your name?
John Coffey, ma'am.
Like they're meeting for the first time. Melinda tells them she had a dream where she met John in the dark. As a gift, she gives him a pendant of St. Christopher, a giant who carried others through hardship, even at the cost of his own life. The guards gently help the sick and exhausted John into the truck. Brutal thinks maybe John purposely held on to Melinda's tumor, hoping it would kill him before they have to carry out the execution. They return to the prison without incident and lay John down in his bed. Then, they let Percy out of the padded cell. He hasn't learned a thing. If anything, he's even more bitter than before. As he walks past the cells, John suddenly grabs him by the throat and pulls him close to the bars. Percy gasps for air, panicking. And just like before, Coffey exhales a thick cloud of gray ash directly into him. The guards quickly check on Percy. He seems okay physically, but his eyes are blank, completely hollow. He starts walking slowly down the mile in a daze. Then, without warning, he turns, pulls a revolver, and empties the chamber into Wild Bill. All 6 bullets hit their mark. Percy drops to the floor as another cloud of ash rises from his mouth. Paul, first to react, runs to Coffey. John tells him he only did what had to be done. He punished evil. It mean I punished them both. When Wild Bill grabbed his arm earlier, he saw everything. Now he wants Paul to see it too. Paul reaches out, and as their hands meet, he's pulled into the memory. He sees the final day of the little girls' lives. The vision is so painful, his body trembles, and every bulb on the block explodes in a violent flash. Wild Bill had been working on the girls' home with their father, even eating dinner with the family. That night, he returned and led the sisters into the woods. He threatened that if one of them screamed, he'd kill the other. They stayed silent. Their love for each other was what ultimately doomed them. John tells Paul he feels pain like that everywhere, all the time. It never stops. He can't take it anymore. Later, Hal and the police arrive. Percy is completely unresponsive, staring into space. Hal asks Paul if what happened in his house has anything to do with Bill's death. Paul lies. He knows the truth wouldn't help anyone now. In the end, Percy is finally transferred to the mental hospital, but as a patient, not staff. Now, Paul faces the one thing he can't ignore. John Coffey is a good man, a holy man, the last person on earth who deserves to die in the electric chair. Paul's done a lot in his life, but if he lets this happen, he knows he's going straight to hell. He talks to his wife about it. She suggests asking John what he wants. Maybe that's where the answer is. With just 2 days left, Paul visits John. The gentle giant sees the torment in Paul's heart and asks him not to worry. He doesn't want to go free. He's tired of walking this world alone, tired of feeling everyone's pain every single day. Death would be a relief. As his last wish, John asks for a slice of that sweet cornbread he remembers, and one other thing. He's never seen a movie before.
Ain't never seen me a flicker show.
The guards are happy to oblige. They bring him to the warden's screening room to watch Top Hat, the same film that made Paul cry at the retirement home. John stares in awe as the dancers glide across the screen. He whispers that they look like angels. Finally, the day of the execution arrives. Paul removes the pendant Melinda gave John, promising to return it when this is all over. John smiles. He tells them he had a dream about Mouseville, where Mr. Jingles performed tricks for 2 little girls. Alive and happy. When they lead him into the execution chamber, John pauses. He can feel the hate coming from the people in the gallery, especially the girls' grieving parents. Some even say he should be executed twice just to suffer more. Brutal gently tells him to focus on the guards instead, the ones who know the truth and care deeply for him. Dean ties him to the chair with tears streaming down his face. Paul tries to stay strong, keeping his expression cold and professional. As he reads out the sentence, they place the black hood over John's head, but John pleads. He doesn't want to be left in the dark. He's afraid of it. Paul honors his wish and leaves the hood off, soaking the sponge with water. Everyone in the room waits for the order. Paul hesitates. He can't speak. Instead, he walks up and takes John's hand one last time. In his mind, he keeps hearing the same words over and over. They helped kill him, and it happens every day. It's so unfair, so wrong. Finally, Paul gives the command.
Roll on 2.
The execution is swift. There are no screams, just silence and the sound of grown men quietly crying. Afterward, Paul gently places the St. Christopher pendant back around John's neck. Back in the present, Paul finishes telling the story. That was the last execution he ever oversaw. After that, he and Brutal transferred to a juvenile facility to help guide troubled kids onto the right path. Elaine doesn't quite believe everything Paul has told her. After all, he should be much older than he looks, so Paul brings her with him on a walk. They arrive at an old cabin in the woods. Inside, tucked in a cigar box, lives an old friend, Mr. Jingles, the same little mouse, still rolling a spool around like always. Elaine is stunned. Paul explains that after John's execution, the mouse came back to him, and just like with Paul, John's healing touch passed some of his gift onto the little guy. Paul is now 108 years old. He's outlived everyone he's ever known, and he believes this long life is part of the punishment he was given for helping to kill a true miracle. Now, he's had to bury Elaine too. Of course, he knows he won't live forever, but he'll live long past the point he's ready to say goodbye. Stephen King has called The Green Mile the most faithful film adaptation of any of his books. When he visited the set, he even asked to be strapped into the electric chair to see what it was like. He quickly asked to be let out. Tom Hanks agreed to take on the role of Paul as a favor to director Frank Darabont. Years earlier, he had turned down the lead in The Shawshank Redemption to do Forrest Gump. The film used 15 different trained mice, each taught for over a month to perform unique tricks. But the most iconic moment, Mr. Jingles rolling the spool, was actually a special effect. A string pulled the spool, and the mouse followed a scent trail laid on it. In one take, Tom Hanks wasn't pretending when he wiped off his jacket. The mouse had really left a mess. And when Paul introduces Elaine to Mr. Jingles, that little guy is supposed to be 9 times older than any mouse has ever lived. The mouse that Percy steps on, just a prop, a puppet actually. It wasn't a real animal. The actor who played John Coffey, Michael Clarke Duncan, was recommended by Bruce Willis. The two had worked together on Armageddon. During the film's most emotional scenes, Duncan would think back to his own childhood, specifically the pain of being abandoned by his father. Despite how towering he looks in the movie, Michael Clarke Duncan wasn't that tall in real life. Actually, he was shorter than some of his co-stars. To create the illusion, the crew had him stand on a box, while David Moore stood flat on the ground, and Tom Hanks was placed in a specially dug trench. They also built miniature versions of the prison bed and the electric chair to enhance the effect and make Coffey look larger than life. You know where to find the name of the movie in the video description. But before you go, let us know in the comments, what would you have done in Paul Edgecomb's place? And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you want more amazing stories like this one.